So, you may have noticed that I started, that I redid a couple of these because they were too big. Why did I not do this first? This is the first time I've done this very specific thing. So, you live and you learn. But obviously, I should have held this up to the foot and been like, oh, wait a minute, that's too big. But I didn't. And now I'm paying the price. So that's what I did. I folded this foil and I put it there to where it looks the right size, and then I built off of that. Easy peasy. The larger ones that I made, though, I think I can still use because there are a variety of places that these particular ones are used. I think, we'll see. And the really exciting news that I got today is I was doing just another random search. I did all this research on the internet and just on my own videotaping and getting footage of the Colossus for reference. And just randomly I typed it in again yesterday, Barba, and clicked on pictures on Google. And this time I found some guy, and why did this not come up before? I don't know. But like a forum from 3 years ago, this lady was making a costume of Barba for her kid. And was like, does anyone have reference? And this guy posted all these screenshots of Barba in the T-pose, which, like, how did he get that? Well, apparently there's some kind of editor hacky thing that lets you get into the game. I don't know how it works. I'm not technical. But he actually was able to get me access, or get me pictures of actual assets from the game. Check this out. I've got all these textures now, straight out of the game. God, it's a lifesaver. I mean, I've been kind of swinging in the dark. Like, is that a bunch of little bricks, or is that like a squiggly pattern? It's hard to tell in the screenshots that I have. But here, I mean, they're still tiny little files. I mean, you can see the size of them. Looks like some are 64 by 64, some are 128 pixels by 128 pixels. That's the size of textures that I was making when I first started in the industry. Remember on Descent 3 and some of the PS2 games we worked on. It's crazy. Anyway, so I'm looking at these and I'm like, oh, okay. And I got pretty close on a lot of them. This little emblem guy, well, look at this. You can see they're not, it's not symmetrical like I thought it was, which that's interesting. And it has enough room in it for a little bit of interpretation. It's kind of like these Zelda figures that I've been doing over the past many years. Some of them look at, here's this 8-bit character, right? And he's however many pixels wide. And I was like, I interpret that as, these are the eyes and this is the mouth, and I get the general idea of what they're trying to go with. And I'd go pretty literal, but I mean, like this ring of teeth around here. If the creature has really had that and you saw it interpreted through that many pixels, would you actually see the teeth? And that's kind of that gray area. And so when it comes to designing this, I want to get as close to the spirit of it as possible, right? And that's hard to do when you can't tell what's going on most of the time. Like with the Zelda ones, I'm a little more liberal with my interpretation. For instance, look at this guy, right? Like, those are clearly swords on his hands. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So when I did the sculptural version of him, it was like, let's make them like these weird, crazy hoof blades. Something that might naturally grow on a guy. So, you know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of the liberal interpretation. I'm trying to go with a more conservative interpretation with this, because this thing, like the Zelda project, that's kind of my own little, my interpretation of how I saw these guys when I was a kid and what I saw in my imagination. And this is more like an homage to something that I think is a truly brilliant turning point in our industry, and something that can be pointed at from a historical perspective. As, this is the point when games really started to speak on their own as an art form, as their own medium. So that's why I'm being more conservative with this one, trying to be as accurate as possible with these textures, and I'm just so excited that I now have access to them. And so let's go back into fast forward and back to work. I'm probably going to redo some of these, and it looks like there's a couple more that areas that were just so muddy I could not tell what was going on, and now I see exactly what was going on. So here we go. So in case you can't tell, what I'm doing here is making a kneecap piece. This is the basic understructure, and I'll be using my stamps to build up the details on it, and after that I will be molding the entire thing because both kneecaps are identical, so that's really nice and convenient. Well, you'll see. So I went to Michael's and they were out of this amazing mold putty, but they did have this new stuff that I haven't tried before called Easy Mold. It's essentially the same stuff. I think I like it a little bit better. It's a little more expensive, unfortunately, but I molded these two identical pieces, and just squeezing the mold, this purple one, the Easy Mold, is firm, more firm, which is what I need for these pieces. When you're pressing an already firm material into a mold, if it's too flexible, it's just going to bend and distort, and then when you pull it out, it's worse. So we're going to see how it worked here. This is a piece that I'm hoping that I can press 3 more versions of, and then just apply them right on this kneecap piece. Trying to pull it off without tearing it. I already tore it a little bit there. You can see I should have made it, I should have used more mold stuff to make it thicker. So yeah, that looks like a pretty good mold. Got a lot of detail. It got into all the little nooks and crannies like it needs to. The knee thing has 4 of these little crenellation things on it. Pretty evenly spaced. So let's see how this works. So just like when I was making this mold, you may have noticed I was pulling off little bits and shoving them into the cracks and crevices. And when I'm filling the mold, I'm pretty much doing exactly the same thing. If you just take one giant piece and try to mush it in there, you're doubtlessly going to get all sorts of little air pockets and blumpy bits. We don't want blumpy bits. So one thing I'm noticing here now that I'm putting these little guys on here is that the kneecap piece must be wider because there's a lot more space between these crenellation bits. So there's 2 ways I can go with that. I can just kind of cheat a little bit and just stick them closer together and say, it's close enough. Or, like I was saying before, I'm trying to be conservative with this. I'm trying to really honor the original piece as much as possible. So if that's the case, then I want to spread them out to how far they really are apart, and then I'm just going to have to add material to the sides of this. And I think I'll go that route. Honestly, it's not going to be that much more work. So here's what's going on right now, boys and girls. I've been using my molds to make multiple copies of a variety of bits and pieces, such as this beautiful toenail. You can see here in my reference work that's going to be going around his hoof, which is, move all this crap here, you can see this will go like so. The first one I made was flat, and then I realized I think there are a couple where I'm going to need flat ones, but for the most part they're curved. So I took one out of the flat mold after a couple hours and then just laid it on a curved surface, and then I made a mold out of that. So this is really casting of a mold of a casting of a mold of an original. But when it comes to old battered up stone and stuff, you don't, in my opinion, you don't actually lose anything from that process. You actually gain lots of neat little noise and imperfections and the kind of stuff that you see in ruins. And that's kind of what this beast is. His armor is kind of made out of ruins, so I think that worked well. Right, so basically whenever I get a chance, I just come into my garage, I stamp a couple of these out and throw them in the box. And at some point I'll figure out exactly how many I'll need, etc., etc. This is the bit that goes above the toenail, the top of the hoof part. I'm going to need less of these, and I'm going to need to start doing more weird wedge versions of them, but you know, when I get to that I'll point it out. Let's look at the kneecap, shall we? So I started with this guy. I molded him, which I used to cast this part, I ended up doing quite a few modifications because it's just a little smaller and shorter. So I went ahead and I made another mold of this, which I'm putting on this side. Let's see how that turned out, shall we? I think it turned out pretty good. Use a little bit of work to finesse that, but overall it's working fine. Let's go, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, these guys. So the shoulder pad has these weird crenellation things coming off of it. So you may have noticed I went and I made a two-part mold by, again, taking the first piece that I molded, making another mold of that, and then squish a piece of clay between these two like a sandwich, open it, pull the piece out, and then I just put it in this inner curved surface so that it makes a nice consistent curve for all of them. So once I get them all trimmed up, they should all sit across here quite nicely. We'll see. Same curvy business with these guys that are going on the thigh piece. These are going to fit in like so. I just roughed in the first part of this ridge thing. That's essentially the same as these, but it wasn't quite exactly the same shape, so I have to do another one. That's fine, and then I'll mold this and duplicate it 3 more times. And I think that's pretty good summation of what I've been doing and what I will be doing for a while. So we'll get back to the fast forwarding. Just kidding, back to talking. This was something, if you look at the artwork here, you can see there's some wider where the UVs have been stretched out, and some tighter where the UVs were squished together. So I'm having to do that by, again, taking the piece after a couple hours. I pulled it out and I bent it and squished it and squashed it the right way that I thought was appropriate. I call it Joshy squashing. I don't really call it that. And made a mold out of that. So now I've got 3 different molds. I've got a flat version, I've got a curved long and a curved short. I'm probably gonna end up making another one or two, but anyway, okay. Now we're all on the same page. Specifically this page right here. This is the page we're on.